For thousands of years, a hardy native plant quietly fed entire nations across North America and survived disaster after disaster, until modern America declared it a worthless weed. How does a crop once vital enough to shape indigenous agriculture and sustain early settlers end up erased by industrial farming, policy, and memory? The answer exposes what we've lost and what still grows, hidden in plain sight. Long before fields of corn or rows of wheat stretched across the continent, communities in the Southeast relied on a perennial tuber that returned each year without needing to be sown. Generations of indigenous farmers shaped the land with careful hands, establishing beds of Jerusalem artichoke along river valleys and near seasonal camps. Archaeobotanical studies suggest this partnership began as far back as 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, placing it among the oldest known cultivated crops in North America. Its roots anchored more than just the soil. They anchored diets, trade, and tradition. Unlike many of the crops that would later define American agriculture, Jerusalem artichoke thrived on being left in place. Families harvested tubers as needed, pulling them from the earth fresh through autumn and winter, rather than storing them in cellars. The plant's resilience to drought and insects meant harvests were steady, even when other foods failed. In the Southeast, perennial beds were tended for generations, often interplanted with sunflowers and other native crops, forming the backbone of garden systems that predated maize. Oral accounts from tribal knowledge holders describe these patches as living larders, visited season after season. Tubers could be eaten raw, roasted in ashes, or ground into flour. Some groups carried them along migration routes, establishing new beds at each stop, while others traded them across long distances. The crop's persistence in the wild is a testament to how carefully it was woven into the landscape. By the time European explorers arrived, the Jerusalem artichoke was already deeply embedded in indigenous agriculture. Samuel de Champlain, writing in the early 1600s, found it growing in the gardens of the Nauset and Abenaki peoples, alongside beans and squash. He noted its taste, likening it to artichoke, but what he witnessed was more than a staple, managed with intention and skill. Even as maize spread northward and became a dominant crop, many communities continued to maintain their perennial artichoke beds, valuing their reliability and the security they offered through lean seasons. The story of Jerusalem artichoke is not one of a wild plant occasionally foraged, but of a crop rooted in the collective memory and daily life of indigenous nations. Its role as a foundational food, not just a fallback in hard times, is written into the very landscapes where it still grows, often unnoticed today. Helianthus tuberosus stands apart from the crops that would later dominate American farms. Classified as a perennial member of the sunflower family, this plant shares its genus, Helianthus, with the familiar annual sunflower, but its most valuable part lies underground. The tubers, knobby and irregular, form a tangled network beneath tall stalks topped with yellow-gold blossoms. These flowers, like their relatives, follow the arc of the sun across the sky, a trait captured in the Italian word girassola, meaning turning to the sun. The name Jerusalem artichoke is a linguistic puzzle. There is no connection to the city of Jerusalem, nor is the plant related to the globe artichoke. Early European botanists and traders encountering the plant in indigenous gardens borrowed the Italian name Girasole artisioco. Over time, girasole became corrupted to Jerusalem in English, while artichoke stuck thanks to Samuel de Champlain's early comparison of its flavor to the thistle-like vegetable. In France, the tuber became known as topinambur, a name borrowed from the Tupinamba people of Brazil, though the crop itself has no South American roots. In North America, it has also gone by sunchoke, sunroot, and Indian potato. Botanically, Helianthus tuberosus is native to the eastern and central regions of North America, stretching from the Ohio and Mississippi valleys up through the Midwest, the East Coast, and into southern Canada. The plant can reach heights of 6 to 8 feet. Its rough, hairy stems and leaves supporting clusters of small sunflower-like blossoms that appear late in the summer. The underground tubers vary in size, color, and shape. They can be round, elongated, or tinged with red or purple. Unlike potatoes, which have been bred for uniformity, Jerusalem artichoke tubers remain stubbornly inconsistent, a trait that would later complicate their place in commercial agriculture. The species name tuberosus refers to these edible roots. Their structure allows the plant to survive harsh winters, drought, and poor soils, traits that made it a reliable food source for centuries. The plant's perennial nature means it does not need to be replanted each year. Instead, it spreads underground, forming dense patches that can persist for generations. This resilience, both above and below ground, is written into its scientific identity. Helianthus tuberosus is not just a curiosity of the garden, but a botanical survivor, shaped by thousands of years of human selection and ecological adaptation. On a windswept research plot in Wisconsin, an agronomist kneels beside a dense stand of Jerusalem artichoke, resilient and persistent. He pulls a handful of earth, revealing a cluster of tubers, knobby, irregular, but thriving where corn would falter. This is no accident. Unlike annual crops that demand the ritual of plowing and planting each spring, Jerusalem artichoke reappears year after year without a single seed sown. Its perennial roots burrow deep, drawing nutrients from soils that other crops abandon. Field trials on sandy, low-fertility ground show that this plant continues to yield when neighbors wither. Even after droughts or harsh winters, the beds return, green and vigorous, requiring almost nothing from the farmer but a steady hand at harvest. The plant's tolerance is more than legend, tolerance that shows up in measured soil tests and long-term observation. Agronomists measure soil organic matter before and after several years of Jerusalem artichoke cultivation and find little depletion. This tuber shrugs off poor soils, resists common pests, and rarely needs fertilizer. In the Midwest, it grows wild along roadsides and in forgotten fields, outcompeting weeds and surviving where commercial crops fail. Its foliage shades the ground, suppressing competitors and conserving moisture. No insecticides are needed. Few pests trouble a plant evolved alongside the region's native flora. Even in years of record heat or unexpected frost, the beds persist, anchoring food security for those who rely on them. The nutritional story unfolds underground. Each tuber is dense with calories, making it a reliable source of energy. Nutritionists analyzing its flesh find high levels of potassium, iron, and magnesium, minerals often lacking in modern diets, but its most distinctive trait lies in its carbohydrates. Instead of storing starch like potatoes, Jerusalem artichoke relies on inulin, a complex fiber. Inulin passes through the upper digestive tract untouched, feeding beneficial bacteria in the gut. Studies link regular consumption to improved metabolic health and a more diverse microbiome. For people managing blood sugar, inulin offers a slow, steady release of energy without the spikes of refined grains. The tubers are naturally gluten-free, opening the door for alternative flours and new recipes in kitchens wary of wheat. There is a catch: adapt and cook carefully. Inulin can ferment in the gut, causing gas or discomfort in those unaccustomed to it. Traditional cooking methods, roasting, boiling, or slicing thin, help reduce these effects, making the tuber more palatable and easier to digest. Over time, regular eaters tend to adapt, and the health benefits outweigh the initial awkwardness. The perennial habit, the resilience to adversity, and the nutritional punch all point to a crop built for survival, not just abundance. In the hands of small farmers and gardeners, Jerusalem artichoke offers food security without dependence on annual seed purchases or chemical inputs. Its ability to persist, to regenerate, and to nourish makes it a quiet powerhouse, one that flourishes on the margins, overlooked by industrial eyes, but proven in the soil. The virtues are clear, even as the story edges toward the barriers that would soon hold it back. In the shadow of the post-war agricultural boom, engineers gathered in Midwestern workshops, determined to bring every food crop into the age of machines. Potatoes, once dug by hand, now rolled off conveyor belts in perfect rows, lifted by steel fingers designed for uniformity. But when these same harvesters met the Jerusalem artichoke, the result was chaos underground. The tubers, shaped more like knobby ginger than smooth potatoes, grew in tangled clusters, some buried deep, others clinging together in tight knots. No matter how the blades sliced or the shakers rattled, machines left half the crop in the soil or mangled it beyond use. Agricultural engineers, tasked with adapting equipment for new crops, ran into a wall. Potato diggers, refined over decades to handle round, even tubers, could not cope with the wild variability of Jerusalem artichoke. One season, a field might yield thumb-sized nuggets. The next, foot-long roots twisted around each other like rope. The perennial habit only made things harder. Unlike annual potatoes, which grew in neat, predictable lines, these tubers spread unpredictably from year to year, defying the logic of row crop machinery. Commodity standards demanded uniformity. By the 1940s, federal grading regulations for potatoes set strict rules: size, shape, absence of blemishes. Crops had to fit through sizing screens and stack neatly in crates. Jerusalem artichoke, with its unpredictable forms and clumping growth, failed every test. Packing houses rejected loads that could not be sorted or boxed to specifications. Even if farmers managed a decent harvest by hand, the supply chain had no room for a crop that refused to behave. The problem extended beyond the field. Industrial food processors, built to handle mountains of identical potatoes, found Jerusalem artichoke almost impossible to peel or slice at scale. Its fibrous skin and uneven surface jammed equipment designed for smooth, regular produce. In the 1980s, a new push to process the tuber for ethanol and animal feed ran aground when drying plants reported that the fibrous mass clogged their machinery, and distillation yields lagged far behind expectations. For the engineers, the verdict was clear. The Jerusalem artichoke could not be tamed by the machines that powered American agriculture. Its stubborn irregularity, once a sign of resilience and abundance, became a liability in a system that prized efficiency and uniformity above all else. As the era of mechanization advanced, crops that did not fit the mold were left behind, crowded out not by failure in the soil, but by the relentless logic of the assembly line. By the early 20th century, the Jerusalem artichoke had been quietly dropped from the lists of crops eligible for federal support. While corn, wheat, and potatoes benefited from price guarantees and research funding, perennial tubers like Helianthus tuberosus were left without a pathway to subsidy. The economics of American agriculture favored crops that could be standardized, patented, and sold year after year. The Jerusalem artichoke's perennial nature meant no recurring seed sales, no annual fertilizer contracts, and no patent royalties for seed companies. It simply returned on its own, year after year, outside the cycle of profit that drove the rest of the farm economy. Records from the period show no mention of Jerusalem, artichoke in subsidy schedules, or extension service recommendations. USDA bulletins and state program lists from the 1920s and the 1930s focused on annual grains and vegetables, crops that fit the model of repeatable, scalable production. Without the backing of federal programs, the crop lost its visibility in research and education. County agents, following the lead of Washington, stopped promoting it to growers, and the knowledge faded from agricultural colleges and farm circulars. Unlike hybrid corn or patented potatoes, no company could claim ownership of Jerusalem Artichoke. The lack of a patent revenue cycle made it invisible to the forces shaping modern agriculture, as policies and profit models aligned around crops that required constant investment. A plant that offered resilience and autonomy found itself quietly written out of the story. A historian at the USDA put it plainly: if it could not be patented or subsidized, it could not compete. In the early 1980s, a company called American Energy Farming Systems, spelled AEFS, promised a new golden age for struggling farmers across the Midwest. The pitch was a bold promise: plant Jerusalem artichokes, sign a buyback contract, and watch your fields deliver both food and fuel. AEFS advertisements claimed that sunchokes could be turned into ethanol more efficiently than corn, offering a path to energy independence and steady profits. Contracts offered growers half of pooled sales and a 15% bonus on direct sales, with projections that a few deals could pay off the initial investment and leave farmers with a surplus crop for years to come. But the reality unraveled quickly. Processing plants failed to deliver on the promised yields. The fibrous tubers jammed equipment and distillation costs soared as oil prices fell. AEFS shifted its sales pitch from ethanol to livestock feed and even health foods, but few buyers materialized. By 1985, complaints poured in from Minnesota, North Dakota, and beyond. Farmers who had paid thousands for contracts and seed were left with fields overrun by an unsellable crop. The total losses reached $25 million. State attorneys general filed lawsuits for consumer fraud, and bankruptcy closed the doors of AEFS for good. The fallout left a deep scar. Extension agents and lenders grew wary of perennial crops pitched as miracle solutions. For many, Jerusalem artichoke became a cautionary tale, less a forgotten food and more a warning written into the soil. In farmers markets from Vermont to Oregon, a handful of growers are once again digging Jerusalem artichokes from the ground, this time with lessons learned and eyes wide open. On small plots, community-supported agriculture programs offer shares of these knobby tubers to adventurous customers and local chefs. The appeal is clear: a perennial harvest that shrugs off drought, thrives in poor soil, and returns year after year without replanting. But the plant's resilience comes with a warning. Growers now space tubers 12 to 18 inches apart and install rhizome barriers, knowing that without boundaries, Jerusalem artichoke can take over a patch of ground and refuse to leave. Chefs in urban kitchens prize the tuber's nutty flavor and versatility, roasted, pureed, or sliced thin in salads. Demand is steady, but supply remains limited by the crop's stubborn independence. For those willing to manage its vigor, the rewards are real. Harvest begins in late fall, when the stalks wither and the earth cools. Tubers are dug fresh, their skin thin and crisp, destined for kitchens that value ingredients with a sense of place. Growers emphasize control. Dig every tuber at harvest, rotate beds, and never compost scraps where you do not want a new patch to sprout. With care, Jerusalem artichoke fits into modern gardens as a reliable, low-input food, one that rewards patience, planning, and a willingness to work with nature's wild edge. Today, Jerusalem artichokes still thrive unnoticed at field edges and vacant lots, nature's quiet resistance to monoculture. As climate change exposes the fragility of industrial crops, the value of resilient, untamed foods becomes urgent. Our future food security may depend on what we choose to remember or to forget. Sometimes the solution is already growing beneath our feet. Share your thoughts below.